I want to bring in now the incoming Senate Majority Leader, South Dakota Republican John Thune. Great to see you. First of all, let's start with Susan Collins. She's known as what would be called a swing vote often on confirmations. Are there members of your chamber, though, who seem to be shifting? It seems like it's a bit more in Pete's favor. He didn't want to call that. What's happening?
I think he's making his argument, Harris, and he's doing a nice job. A lot of these nominees, including Pete Hegseth, have been making the rounds on the Capitol, starting with the committees of jurisdiction that will have responsibility for the confirmation process and ensure that their nominations make it eventually to the floor. And I think the nominees are doing a really nice job. I mean, Pete Hegseth, in his conversations, I think, with members, has been very compelling in terms of what he believes is necessary to put the real focus on the war fighter when it comes to the Defense Department's priorities. As you heard Susan Collins talk about procurement reform, that's something that's important to a lot of our members. And he's got the background. He's a combat veteran. He's obviously somebody who understands what it takes to fight battles on the ground, and I think that's a perspective that is very impressive to a lot of the members that he's had the opportunity to meet with so far and to be questioned by.
You are loved by your voters in South Dakota, have covered you for many years. You're about to play a different role. What kind of conversations are you having with President-elect Trump's incoming nominees, potentially incoming, they're nominees at this point, based on your background, your experience with this process?
Well, the last time President Trump was president, Harris, I was the chairman of a major committee, and we had the responsibility for vetting and reporting out and confirming a lot of the Trump nominees, including Secretary of Transportation, Secretary of Commerce, FCC. A lot of those came through our committee, and so I've been through this process. I think that the Trump nominees are approaching this the right way. They're coming in, they've been very open and candid and subjecting themselves to lots of questions from lots of senators from different parts of the country who have different perspectives on these issues and want to hear from them about their vision for the jobs that they've been nominated for. And I think the important thing here is President Trump needs his team in place to be able to implement his agenda. These are the people that he selected.
Right.
I give wide latitude and wide deference to the president when he makes these selections. We have a job to do, advice and consent, and we will do it and make sure that there's a process that's fair to all these nominees.
But look, the American people who voted feel that way. Take a look at this. This is a CNN poll that shows that actually, if we can put it up, north of 50% of people like the way, 55% approve of and like the way Trump is handling his presidential transition. So it's what you're talking about. I want to talk a little bit about a couple of things. So a few minutes ago, we learned that Christopher Wray has announced his resignation. He was meeting with, members of the Bureau, his rank and file, and he announced that that will happen at the end of this year, going into January. And President-elect Trump has already announced Kash Patel is who he would like to see take that position. Your immediate reaction to Wray's announcement?
I think probably expected. I think when there was a transition, the president comes in, wants his people in place, and I think understandably the people who have those roles today, I think, get that. So I don't see that as a big surprise, and the president has nominated someone for that position who is already making the rounds and having these meetings on Capitol Hill with the senators who are going to be really relevant to his nomination process, and I think doing a nice job again of explaining his vision for the future of the FBI. These are a lot of agencies, as you know, Harris, that are desperately in need of reform, of modernization, of some house cleaning, and I think a lot of these nominees are coming forward in a way that explains how they want to go about doing that, and I think it's going to be, and you're right, the American people wanted to see change. That's why they gave President Trump the vote. Yeah, I mean, it's a huge number. Yeah. And I think it speaks to just the appetite there is in this country for a different direction for the country. The President Trump is giving the American voters that, and we want to work with him as willing partners to make sure that we do our jobs, but also that he has his team in place to implement his agenda.
Yeah, I don't know if there is the intestinal fortitude or will among both sides of the aisle to get it done, but I vote for starting with DHS, which has let us down on both FEMA and the department that handles not just emergencies, but the border. Right. I mean, and Secret Service, not let us down, but we need to shore them up and give them what they need. So That's my vote. Not that anybody really cares.
Well, on so many levels, it's time to wipe the slate clean, start over, start fresh. That's what the American people demanded. That's what President Trump is going to give them, and we're going to work with him to do that.
Senator, great to have you on the program. Thank you.
Thanks, Harris.
I'm Steve Doocy.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.